I had driven that dirt road for 6 years like a silent prayer, but that afternoon, an industrial dumpster blocked the way. Inside lay my grandmother's entire life treated like refuse. Standing on the porch in a crisp polo shirt was my uncle, ready to announce his sale. I did not scream. I simply decided that if he wanted to sell this farm for $1.6 million today, he would do it with the noose he had tied for himself. My name is Ruby Stewart, and for 36 years, the gravel crunching under my tires on the road to Marigold Farm had sounded like a heartbeat. It was a rhythm that meant safety, warm oatmeal cookies, and the smell of earth that had been turned over by 3 generations of my family. I knew every pothole on that 2-mile stretch outside of Grafton Ridge better than I knew the back of my own hand. But on that Tuesday afternoon, the heartbeat stopped dead. I was supposed to be there an hour later. I had left my office at Lakemont University early, skipping a faculty meeting because a strange knot of anxiety had tightened in my chest around noon. I told myself I was just going to help organize Grandma Evie's papers. We had buried her 2 weeks ago, and the grief was still a raw, open thing, like a burn that refused to scab over. I expected to find the house quiet. I expected to see the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light in the front hallway. Instead, I found a metal monstrosity blocking the driveway. It was a roll-off dumpster, the massive industrial kind usually reserved for construction sites or demolition zones. It sat there like a rust-colored wound against the vibrant green of the late spring pastures, sitting askew so that no car could pass it to get to the main house. It smelled of wet rot and stagnant iron. I slammed my car into park and killed the engine. The silence of the country was gone, replaced by the heavy thud of objects hitting metal. My boots hit the dirt, kicking up clouds of dust as I ran toward the obstruction. Standing on the porch, looking like he was posing for a campaign photo, was my uncle, Dale Maddox. He was not dressed for cleaning. He was not dressed for mourning. Dale was wearing a navy polo shirt that was tucked tightly into khaki slacks, the kind with a razor-sharp crease down the front. His loafers were polished to a shine that reflected the afternoon sun. He held a clipboard in one hand and was pointing with the other, directing 2 men in gray coveralls who were hauling heavy black bags out the front door. I did not look at him. My eyes were drawn to the dumpster. I scrambled up the metal ridges on the side, ignoring the sharp bite of the steel against my palms. I pulled myself up to the rim and looked down. The air left my lungs as if I had been punched. It was not trash. It was a life, right on top. Splayed open like a dead bird was one of Grandma Evie's planting journals. I recognized the spine, taped together with duct tape years ago. She had recorded every frost, every drought, and every harvest in that book since 1974. Beside it lay the family photo albums, the leather covers cracked and peeling, frames shattered where they had been tossed carelessly onto the metal floor. And then I saw the quilt. It was the Star of Bethlehem pattern, a kaleidoscope of blues and creams. I had sat on the floor of the living room when I was 12 years old, my clumsy fingers pushing the needle through the batting while Grandma guided my hand. We had spent an entire winter making that quilt. It was meant to be an heirloom. Now, it was soaking up a puddle of something dark and oily at the bottom of a steel bin. The scream tore out of my throat before I could stop it. Stop it! The sheer volume of my voice cracked the air. The 2 workers on the porch froze mid-step, a heavy box suspended between them. They looked at me, then at the man on the porch. Confused by the sudden intrusion of raw, hysterical grief, I vaulted over the side of the dumpster, dropping into the filth. The smell was overpowering down here, a mix of mildew and the metallic tang of disregard. I grabbed the quilt, pulling it frantically from the muck, my hands shaking so hard I could barely make a fist. I grabbed the planting journal. I tried to gather the loose photos that were scattering in the breeze, my fingers scrabbling against the cold floor of the dumpster. "What are you doing?" I screamed, looking up at the rim of the bin where Dale's face had now appeared. He looked down at me with an expression that was terrifyingly blank. There was no surprise, no guilt, just a mild annoyance, as if I were a stray dog that had wandered onto a golf course. "Ruby," Dale said. His voice was calm, leveled. The voice he used when he was trying to sell a client on a high-risk portfolio. "You are making a scene. Come out of there. You are covered in filth. You are throwing her away." I choked out, clutching the dirty quilt to my chest. "This is not trash. Dale, this is Grandma. This is everything she was." Dale sighed, a long, performative exhalation of breath. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the workers. "Take 5. Boys," he said. The workers set the box down and retreated to their truck, grateful to be out of the line of fire. Dale turned his attention back to me. He leaned over the edge of the dumpster, resting his clean hands on the rim, careful not to touch the rust. "This is estate business. Ruby," he said, "we have to clear the property. The house needs to be empty by the weekend." "Empty?" I asked. "We haven't even gone through the will properly. We haven't sorted anything. You can't just throw her life into a dumpster." "I am the executor," Dale said. The word sounded heavy, final, like a gavel striking wood. "That means the burden of decision falls on me. And the decision is that this junk is devaluing the property. No one wants a farmhouse filled with 50 years of hoarding." Hoarding, I stood up on a pile of broken picture frames, my height bringing me almost eye level with him. "These are heirlooms. They are dust collectors," he corrected me. "And we do not have time for sentimentality. I have a schedule to keep." He reached down into a box that was sitting on the porch railing near him. It was a small wooden box, the recipe box that had sat on Grandma's counter for as long as I had been alive. It held the instructions for the apple pie she made every Thanksgiving, the cough syrup she brewed when we were sick, the blackberry jam that half the county offered to pay for. Dale held it up. "Do you want this?" he asked. "Yes," I said, reaching up. "Give it to me." He looked at the box, then at me. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth that usually comes from family. He was not looking at his niece. He was looking at an obstacle. "It is just paper, Ruby," he said, and then, with a flick of his wrist that was casual and practiced, he tossed the box. He did not toss it to me. He tossed it into the far corner of the dumpster. The box hit the metal wall with a crack. The lid flew off. Hundreds of index cards, handwritten in Grandma's looping script, exploded into the air like confetti. They fluttered down into the muck, landing in the oil, on the broken glass, on the garbage. I stared at the scattered cards, paralyzed by the cruelty of the act. It was not violent in the traditional sense, but it was a violence against memory that cut deeper than a slap. "Why?" I whispered. "Because you need to understand the reality of the situation," Dale said, straightening his shirt. "The house is being liquidated. The land is being liquidated. I have changed the locks on the doors as of 20 minutes ago. You changed the locks I asked." The shock turning into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. "I have a key." "I have always had a key." "Not anymore," Dale said. "It is an insurance requirement. We can't have unauthorized personnel wandering through a construction site." "Construction site," I repeated. "It is a farm. Not for long," he said. I looked past him, up to the porch. Marla was there, Dale's wife. She was standing in the shadow of the overhang, her arms crossed over her chest. She was wearing a floral sundress that looked bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to the grim work being done. She did not say a word. She just watched me. Her face was a mask of pity and impatience. It was the look one gives to a child who is throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. She was the silent partner in this demolition, her quiet presence reinforcing Dale's authority. She could have stopped him. She could have told him to save the photos. But she stood there, guarding the door, her silence pressing down on me like a physical weight. I looked back at the recipe cards soaking up the grime. I realized then that if I tried to pick them up, if I tried to save them all, Dale would just stand there and watch. He wanted me to scramble. He wanted me to cry and beg and dig through the trash so he could look at me with that calm, superior detachment and tell the family later how unstable poor Ruby had been, how she had lost her mind with grief. He was baiting me. I looked at the quilt in my arms. It was ruined, stained with oil, smelling of rot. But underneath the quilt, I felt the hard, rectangular shape of the planting journal I had first grabbed. It was the one from the year I was born. I made a choice. I did not scramble for the recipe cards. I did not scream again. I gripped the journal tight against my ribs, shielding it with my body. I climbed over the side of the dumpster, my boots slipping on the metal, until my feet hit the dirt of the driveway. I was covered in dust. There was a smear of grease on my arm. My hair was wild, blown by the wind and my own frenzy. Dale watched me from the clean, elevated safety of the porch. "Go home. Ruby," he said. "Wait for the check. That is what everyone else is doing. Don't make this harder on the family than it needs to be. The family." He used the word like a weapon. He used it to demand compliance. I looked at the house one last time. The windows looked like hollow eyes. The front door, which had always been unlocked for me, was now a fortress I was barred from entering. The message was clear. The history of this place, the history of us, was being erased to make way for a clean sale. He wasn't just cleaning out a house. He was sanitizing a crime scene. He was removing the evidence that people had lived here, loved here, and planned for a future here. I did not say goodbye. I did not plead. I turned my back on him. I walked to my car. My boots heavy with the mud of the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary. I threw the dirty quilt and the journal onto the passenger seat. I started the engine, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. As I reversed down the drive, I saw Dale pull his phone from his pocket, likely texting the rest of the relatives that the crazy niece had been handled. He thought he had won. He thought that by changing the locks and throwing away the past, he had secured his future. He thought I was just a sentimental girl who would go home, wash off the dirt, and wait for her share of the money. But as I drove away, watching the dumpster shrink in my rearview mirror until it was just a red speck, the tears stopped falling. The heat in my chest cooled into something solid and sharp. I looked at the journal on the seat beside me. It was just one book, but it was a start. I was done being the good niece. I scrubbed my hands until the skin was raw and red, standing over the kitchen sink in my apartment. The water swirling down the drain was clear, but in my mind, it was still stained with the brown muck of the dumpster. The smell of wet rust and decaying paper seemed to have seeped into my pores, settling deep under my fingernails where the soap could not reach. I had been home for 3 hours, but the sensation of that cold, industrial metal against my palms refused to leave me. However, it was not the filth that clung to me the tightest. It was the phrase Dale had used, spoken with that sterile, corporate detachment, estate business. He had turned the warmth of my grandmother's home into a transaction. He had taken the place where I learned to walk, where I learned to bake, and where I learned to grieve. And he had reduced it to a ledger entry that needed to be balanced and closed. I turned off the faucet. The silence in my apartment was heavy. It was a stark contrast to the wind and the birdsong of the farm, and usually, I found comfort in this quiet. Tonight, it felt like a vacuum. My phone buzzed on the granite counter, vibrating with a persistence that made my stomach turn. I knew who it was without looking, but I looked anyway. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, watching her name flash. I could picture her sitting in her sunroom in Florida, surrounded by her wicker furniture, worrying. She would want to know if I had made a scene. She would want to know if I had upset Dale. I slid my finger across the screen and answered. "Ruby," she said, her voice tight. "Dale called me. He said you were hysterical. He threw her things in a dumpster." "Mom," I said, my voice sounding incredibly weary to my own ears. "He is throwing away the quilt we made. He threw away the photo albums." "I know. Honey, I know," she soothed, using the tone she used to use when I scraped my knee as a child. "It is awful, but Dale says it is necessary. The house has to be cleared out to be sold. You know how he is about efficiency." "Efficiency?" I asked. "He is erasing her. He is just doing his job as executor." She said, "Look, Ruby, please, do not fight him on this. You know how the family gets. We do not want a feud. Just keep the peace. For Grandma's sake. Just let it go. Keep the peace." That phrase hung in the air between us. traveling over 1,000 miles of fiber optic cable to strangle me. I realized then that this was how it had always been, for 30 years. We had let Dale take the lead, because it was easier than listening to him complain. We had let him choose the restaurants, plan the reunions, and manage the finances because keeping the peace was the highest virtue in the Stewart family. We had mistaken silence for harmony. I realized with a sudden, clarifying jolt that my mother was not asking me to be peaceful. She was asking me to be complicit. I am tired. Mom, I lied. I am going to bed. I hung up before she could protest. I walked over to the dining table where I had placed the only thing I had managed to save. The planting journal. It was dirty, the cover smeared with something dark, but it was intact. I sat down and opened it. The smell of old paper and dried lavender rose from the pages, cutting through the phantom scent of the dumpster. I turned the pages carefully. 1998, the year I turned 9. The handwriting was shaky in places, strong in others. It was a chronicle of weather and soil. And then, I found the entry I had been looking for. Dated mid-April. Ruby helped plant the marigolds today. She has good hands. She does not mind the dirt. She reminds me of myself before I got tired. I ran my finger over the ink. She has good hands. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were not the hot, overwhelming tears of the afternoon. These were cold tears. They were clarifying. Grandma Evie had seen me. She had known who I was, and she had known who Dale was, too. There was no way the woman who wrote this, the woman who cherished every sprout and every bloom, would have wanted her legacy bulldozed into a landfill by a man wearing Italian loafers. I closed the book. Dale wanted me to scream. He wanted me to drive back there tomorrow and throw a tantrum at the gate so he could call the sheriff. He wanted to paint me as the emotional, unstable niece who could not let go, while he played the rational, responsible adult. If I fought him with anger, he would win. He had the legal standing. He had the executor title. So I would not fight him with anger. I would fight him with paper. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I created a new folder on my desktop. I typed the name in all caps. Marigold Evidence. I started digging. I went through my banking history. Going back 5 years. I found the transfer for the new roof I had paid for when Grandma's pension check was short. I downloaded the statement. I found the receipts for the plumber I had hired to fix the septic tank 2 winters ago. I found the emails between Grandma and me where she talked about the farm, about how she wanted the land to stay green, about how she worried Dale did not understand the soil. I dragged every file into the folder, every image, every PDF, every digital footprint that proved I was not just a visitor at Marigold Farm. I was an investor. I was a caretaker. My phone chimed again, a text message this time. It was from Dale. You need to be realistic. Ruby, I know you are upset, but this is how the real world works. Assets get liquidated. Do not make this harder on yourself. We can discuss your share of the proceeds once the sale closes. My share. He thought he could buy my compliance. My thumbs hovered over the keypad. I wanted to type back 1,000 things. I wanted to tell him I knew he was rushing. I wanted to tell him he was a vulture. I wanted to ask him why he was so desperate to sell today. But I stopped. If I replied, I gave him information. I gave him a gauge of my emotional state. I took a screenshot of his message instead. I saved it to the folder, renaming the file with the date and time. Dale text threat 0512. I put the phone down face up. I let the screen go black. I sat there in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamps outside my window. I needed more. Receipts for roof repairs were good, but they were not enough to stop a sale. I needed to know why he was panicking. You do not bring a dumpster and a notary to a family home on a Tuesday unless you are running out of time. I closed my eyes and tried to summon Grandma Evie's voice. I tried to remember the last few months, the days when the cancer was making her tired and foggy. We had spent hours sitting on the back porch, watching the sun go down over the ridge. She talked a lot in those days, jumping between decades, confusing the past and the present. I remembered a Tuesday in late March. It was raining. She was fretting about a draft in the window. "I need to find the papers," she had said, her hands plucking at the blanket on her lap. "What papers?" Grandma, I had asked, tucking the wool around her legs. "The ones for the boy," she said. "For the lawyer? Mr. Graham?" "Graham," I had asked. "The old man in town, Grandma. He retired 10 years ago." No, she had insisted. Her eyes surprisingly sharp for a moment. "In the old town, the brick building, he keeps them safe. Dale does not look. Dale does not see." At the time, I had dismissed it. Grandma often forgot who was retired and who was dead. I thought she was talking about her will, which we all knew was in the safe deposit box at the bank. But now, sitting in my apartment with the digital glow of my evidence folder, the memory felt different. Dale does not look. Graham Larkin. I knew the name. He was an ancient fixture in Grafton Ridge, a lawyer who handled property disputes and fence lines since before I was born. His office was in the historic district, a dusty place that smelled of pipe tobacco and old statutes. If Grandma had gone to him, she had done it quietly. She had done it without Wade driving her. Maybe. Or maybe Wade did drive her. I looked at the clock. It was just past midnight. I could not call Graham now. And I could not go to the farm through the front gate tomorrow. Dale would have changed the code on the electric gate, and if he had security there, they would be watching the main road. But I knew the farm. I knew that the fence on the south pasture, the one that bordered the creek, had a section where the wire had rusted through near the big oak tree. I used to sneak out that way when I was a teenager to meet friends. It was a 2-mile hike from the nearest public road, through dense brush and brambles, but it opened up right behind the old barn. Dale would not know about the hole in the fence. Dale never walked the perimeter. He only looked at the land from the comfort of his air-conditioned SUV, or from the porch. I needed to see what was in the house. I needed to see what was on the desk in the study before he cleared it all into that dumpster. If there was a clue about Graham, or a letter, or anything that contradicted Dale's authority, it would be in that house. I stood up and walked to my closet. I pushed aside my work blazers and my heels. I reached into the back and pulled out my hiking boots and a dark canvas jacket. I was going back, not as a niece coming to mourn, but as something else. I looked at the phone again. It buzzed one more time. Another text from Dale. "I hope you are sleeping it off. We have a lot of work to do." I did not touch the phone. I let the silence stretch out, filling the room, heavy and deliberate. He would look at his phone, waiting for the 3 little dots that showed I was typing. He would wait for the angry paragraph. And when it did not come, he would assume I was sulking. He would assume I was beaten. Let him think that. Let him think I was cowering in my apartment, crying over a quilt. Silence was no longer about submission. Silence was the bait, and he was going to swallow it whole. I parked my sedan 3 miles down the county road, tucking it behind a dense thicket of wild sumac where the reflection of the chrome would not catch the moonlight. The walk back to the property line was a journey through the underbelly of the countryside. I moved through the tall fescue and the briars, the darkness absolute, except for the sliver of moon hanging low over the timberline. I did not use a flashlight. I knew the topography of this land with my feet. I knew where the ground dipped near the creek bed, and where the roots of the ancient sycamores broke the surface like gnarled fingers. My target was not the front gate where the dumpster stood like a sentry. It was the north side of the house, the side facing the dense woods, where the foundations settled deep into the clay. There, half buried under overgrown hostas and ivy, was the storm cellar doors. Grandma Evie used to tell me stories about hiding down there during the tornado of 1976. But for the last 20 years, it had just been a dark mouth that swallowed spiders and rainwater. Dale would not have checked this door. Dale was a man who looked at the horizon, at the curb appeal, at the things that could be photographed for a listing. He did not look at the rot, and he certainly did not look at the roots. I brushed aside the wet leaves, my gloves dampening instantly. The padlock was a heavy iron thing, rusted to a dull orange. I held my breath and inserted the small skeleton key I had kept on my keychain since I was 18, a keepsake Grandma had given me, just in case. I expected resistance. I expected the mechanism to be seized by time. But with a stiff, grinding protest that sounded like a bone breaking, the shackle popped open. I lifted the heavy wooden door. The smell hit me immediately, a dense, suffocating mix of wet earth, limestone, and the unmistakable musk of neglect. I lowered myself into the blackness, pulling the door shut above me until just a crack of night air remained. I turned on the small penlight I had brought, clenching it between my teeth. The stairs were wooden and soft with rot. Groaning under my weight, I moved up into the house proper. Emerging through the pantry floor in the kitchen, the silence of the house was wrong. It was not the peaceful quiet of sleep. It was the hollow silence of a vacuum. I swept the beam of my light across the kitchen. The counters were bare. The ceramic rooster that had held wooden spoons for 40 years was gone. The toaster was gone. The little hook by the window where the calendar always hung was empty. I moved into the living room, my boots making no sound on the hardwood I had helped refinish 10 years ago. The furniture was still there, but it had been pushed into chaotic clusters, draped in plastic sheets that shimmered like ghosts in the beam of my light. The walls were the worst part. Where the gallery of family photos had been the timeline of birthdays, graduations, and weddings, there were now just clean, pale rectangles against the sun-faded wallpaper. It looked like the house had been stripped of its memory. It felt clinical. It felt like an autopsy had been performed on a home that was not yet dead. I headed straight for the study. This was the room Dale would have claimed. It was where Grandpa had managed the farm accounts, and where Grandma had later paid the bills. I pushed the door open. The chaos here was different. It was the chaos of active destruction. Papers were strewn across the heavy oak desk. Cardboard boxes were stacked haphazardly, labeled with black marker in Dale's sharp, angular handwriting, donate, trash, keep, financial. I approached the desk. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that seemed too loud for the room. I felt like a thief. But the real thief was the one who had organized these piles. I started sifting through the papers on the desk. There were sticky notes everywhere. Call appraiser, Tuesday, cleaners, Wednesday, locksmith, done. I moved a stack of utility bills and saw a thick manila folder that had slid partially behind the desk lamp, as if it had been pushed aside in a hurry. I pulled it out. The label on the tab was typed, Project Marigold. I opened it. The first page was not a document. It was a drawing, a large, fold-out architectural rendering printed on high-gloss paper. I shone my light on it, and the image burned itself into my retinas. It was a map of the farm, but the farm was gone. The rolling pasture where the horses used to graze was replaced by a sea of gray asphalt. The barn, the beautiful red barn that had stood since 1920, was erased, replaced by a blocky L-shaped structure labeled Retail Anchor A. The creek was rerouted into a concrete drainage ditch. At the bottom of the page, in stylized bold letters, it read, Marigold Retail Plaza and Parking Complex. I felt bile rise in my throat. He wasn't selling the farm to a family who wanted to love the land. He was selling it to be paved over. He was selling it to become a strip mall. But then my eyes drifted to the date stamp in the corner of the architectural firm's block. September 12th. I froze. My breath hitched. September 12th was 9 months ago. Grandma Evie had been alive then. She had been sitting in her chair, watching the birds, drinking tea. She had been alive, and lucid, and trusting. And on that very day, while she was breathing the air of this farm, Dale had been commissioning drawings to bury it under concrete. He had been planning this demolition while he was still eating her cooking. My hands shook as I turned the page. Beneath the drawing was a printed email chain. The subject line read, Final Offer, Contingency Timeline. The email was from a domain ending in Kestraland Retail. I read the text, the blue light of my penlight trembling over the words. Dale. Per our discussion. The offer stands at $1.6 million. However, the window is closing. We need the title clear and the demolition permits approved before the end of the fiscal quarter. If you can secure the family consent and bypass the probate delay, we can cut the check the same day. Let's get this done. 1.6 million. That was the number. That was the price tag he had put on our history. But why the rush? Why the desperate need to bypass probate? Why the dumpster and the immediate lock change? Dale was greedy. Yes, but he was usually risk-averse. This reckless speed did not fit his profile. I dug deeper into the pile. Under the emails, buried at the bottom of the folder, was a single sheet of paper that looked different. It was crinkled, as if it had been crumpled up and then smoothed out again. It was a loan application form from a regional bank. It was dated 6 months ago. It was a personal loan application for Dale Maddox. I scanned the numbers. He had applied for a loan of $400,000, a massive amount, in the section for collateral. He had written real estate, Marigold Farm, Grafton Ridge. But across the face of the document, in a harsh red ink that looked like a scar, was a stamp, denied, and handwritten next to the stamp, a loan officer had scrawled a note: applicant does not hold title. Property deed not in applicant's name. I stared at the paper, the pieces of the puzzle slamming together with a deafening click in my mind. He was broke, or he was in massive debt. He had tried to leverage the farm to save himself while Grandma was still alive, assuming he could just talk her into signing it over, or that the bank wouldn't check. But the bank had checked. They had denied him because he didn't own it. So he had waited. He had waited for her to die. And now he was drowning. He needed the sale to Kestrel Land and Retail not to benefit the family, but to cover a $400,000 hole in his own life before anyone found out. The $1.6 million wasn't a windfall. It was a lifeline. And he needed it today because the interest or the creditors were knocking at his door. He wasn't acting as an executor. He was acting as a desperate man looking for a liquidity event. I pulled out my phone. I turned the flash off and used the steady beam of the pen light to illuminate the documents. I photographed the blueprint, focusing clearly on the date. I photographed the email about the $1.6 million. I photographed the denied loan application, ensuring the no title stamp was sharp and legible. My fingers flew across the screen. I opened my cloud storage app and uploaded the photos immediately into the folder Marigold Evidence. I watched the little progress bar spin. Uploading. Complete. I took a deep breath. I had the smoking gun. Now I had to vanish. I began to rearrange the papers. I slid the loan application back to the bottom. I put the email on top of it. I folded the blueprint carefully and placed it back in the folder. I slid the folder back under the stack of utility bills, angling it exactly as it had been. Protruding slightly behind the lamp, I stepped back, sweeping the light over the desk one last time. It looked undisturbed. It looked like the workspace of a grieving son busy with administrative duties. Then I heard it. The crunch of gravel. It was distinct and loud in the country silence. Tires rolling slowly over the driveway. Then the sweep of high-intensity headlights cut through the front drapes, slashing across the living room wall like searchlights. Panic, cold and electric, spiked in my veins. He was here, or security was here. I killed my penlight instantly. The room plunged into darkness. I heard the car door slam, then a second slam. Voices, male voices. I did not wait to hear what they were saying. I moved. I slipped out of the study. My movements fluid and silent. I crossed the living room, staying low, avoiding the patches where the headlights from outside were illuminating the dust motes in the air. I heard the front door handle jiggle, then the sound of keys. Damn it, he had the new keys. I scrambled into the kitchen just as the front door creaked open. "Did you leave the lights on?" a voice asked. It was Dale. "No. I checked everything," another voice replied, a deeper voice. Maybe the developer, maybe a lawyer. I reached the pantry. I slid inside, pulling the door almost shut, leaving just a hair of space so the latch wouldn't click. I dropped to my knees and found the opening in the floorboards. I lowered myself onto the rotting stairs of the cellar, my heart thudding so hard I was terrified they could hear it through the floor. I pulled the pantry floor hatch closed above my head, easing it down with agonizing slowness. Darkness swallowed me again. Above me, I heard footsteps entering the kitchen. Heavy, confident steps. "Smells musty in here." The second voice said, "Old houses. It is just dampness," Dale said, his voice directly above my head. "It will all be leveled next week anyway. Do not worry about the smell." I descended the stairs, moving as fast as I dared in the pitch black. I reached the bottom and found the cellar doors. I pushed them up, slipping out into the night air. The cool breeze felt like salvation. I closed the cellar doors, pressing the rusted padlock back into place. I couldn't lock it, but I arranged the hasp so it looked undisturbed. I crouched low, using the overgrown hydrangeas as cover. I looked back at the house. The kitchen light had been turned on. I could see Dale's silhouette moving past the window. He was opening the refrigerator. He looked calm. He looked like a man who thought he controlled everything within those walls. He had no idea that the walls had just talked. I turned and ran. I ran back toward the tree line, moving through the brush with a speed fueled by adrenaline and a cold, hard rage. I didn't stop until I was deep in the woods, until the lights of the farmhouse were gone. I slowed to a walk, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone. The metal felt warm. I looked back one last time toward the invisible property line. Dale wasn't selling the farm to save the family legacy. He wasn't even selling it out of simple greed. He was selling it to save his own skin. And he had made a fatal error. He had assumed that because he held the keys to the front door, he owned the truth of the house. He forgot that a farm has 1,000 ways in and 1,000 ways to speak. He was selling for his survival, and I was going to make sure that survival cost him everything. The morning sun in Grafton Ridge did not feel cleansing. It felt exposing. After a sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling of my apartment, watching the digital clock flick through the hours, I drove into town with the dawn. My destination was not a modern glass building, but a narrow 2-story brick structure in the historic district that looked like it had been holding its breath for 50 years. The brass plaque next to the door was tarnished just enough to imply longevity rather than neglect. Graham Larkin, attorney at law. I pushed open the heavy oak door. A bell chimed, a sharp, mechanical sound that belonged to a different century. The waiting room smelled of lemon polish, old leather, and pipe tobacco. It was the kind of office where time slowed down, where the frantic pace of the modern world was suffocated by the weight of bound case law. Graham Larkin emerged from the back room before I could even sit down. He was a man constructed of sharp angles and tweed. He had to be pushing 80, but his eyes, framed by thick tortoiseshell glasses, were clear and predatory. He did not offer a comforting smile. He looked at me, then at the thick manila envelope I was clutching to my chest, and nodded once. "Ruby Stewart," he said. His voice was like gravel rolling in a dryer. "You look like you have been to war." "I feel like it, Mr. Larkin." I said, "Come back," he said, turning on his heel. His office was a fortress of paper. Stacks of files covered every surface, yet there was a distinct order to the chaos. He sat behind a desk that was large enough to land a small aircraft on and gestured for me to sit in the leather chair opposite him. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I did not talk about the funeral. I opened the envelope and slid the photographs I had taken the night before across the mahogany surface. "I broke into the farmhouse last night." I said, "I know that is illegal. I do not care. You need to see these." Graham did not lecture me on breaking and entering. He simply put on a second pair of glasses over his first and pulled the photos closer. He looked at the architectural rendering of the retail plaza first. He studied the date. He did not blink. He looked at the email printout regarding the $1.6 million offer. His expression remained stony. Then he picked up the photo of the denied loan application. The silence in the room stretched out. I could hear the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. It was a slow, rhythmic thud that matched the anxious beating of my heart. I watched his eyes scan the red ink stamp, "No title." He set the photo down. He took off his reading glasses and folded them deliberately. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "He is underwater," Graham said. It was not a question. He owes $400,000, I said, and he was trying to leverage the farm to pay it off 6 months before Grandma died. Graham nodded slowly. This changes the complexion of things. This is not just an executor being aggressive. This is a fiduciary acting in bad faith to cover personal insolvency. He tapped the photo of the email from the developers. They want a quick close, he noted. They want to bypass probate. That is why he is rushing. That is why he is bullying the family. He needs that money to hit his account before his own creditors come collecting. If this goes to a standard probate timeline, which can take 6 months to a year, your uncle is finished. I leaned forward. So we can stop him. I can take this to the sheriff or to the judge. We can get an injunction today. Right? I was ready to sprint to the courthouse. I was ready to nail the eviction notice to Dale's forehead myself. Graham held up a hand. It was a withered hand, spotted with age, but it commanded absolute silence. No, he said. I blinked. No, what do you mean? No, he is stealing the estate. He is about to sell a farm that has been in my family for 100 years to a strip mall developer. Ruby, listen to me, Graham said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming harder. If you run into court today with pictures you took while trespassing, waving allegations of fraud, what happens? Dale claims the loan application was a mistake, or an inquiry he never followed through on. He claims the blueprints were just exploratory to determine the value of the land for the estate's benefit. He will paint you as the hysterical, grieving niece who is trying to sabotage his work as executor. He leaned in closer. And do you know what happens then? He uses the estate's money to defend himself. He will drain your grandmother's accounts, paying for his defense against you. The legal battle will drag on for 2 years. The developers will walk away. Yes, but the farm will be bled dry by legal fees. Then what do we do? I asked, my voice rising. I can't just let him sell it. We do not let him sell it, Graham said. But we do not stop him from trying to sell it. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a fresh legal pad. He uncapped a fountain pen. Your grandmother came to see me 5 years ago, Graham said. She was worried about exactly this scenario. She knew Dale. She loved him. But she knew he was weak with money. She told me she wanted to ensure the farm went to the one person who knew the difference between soil and dirt. My breath caught in my throat. She executed a deed I asked. Graham nodded. An inter vivos deed, a transfer of title made during her lifetime. She signed Marigold Farm over to you. Ruby. We notarized it. We witnessed it. The intention was for it to be recorded immediately. But she hesitated. She was afraid of breaking Dale's heart while she was still alive. She asked me to hold it. He paused, looking me dead in the eye. Technically, that deed should have been recorded at the county recorder's office to perfect the chain of title against third-party claims. However, she gave me instructions to record it upon her death if she had not done so herself. I sent the clerk over there this morning. By noon today. That deed will be public record. I slumped back in the chair. The relief was so physical it felt like my bones were melting. I own it. I own the farm. You do? Graham said, but Dale does not know that yet. And the title search company for the developer likely has not pulled the update yet because these things take 48 hours to clear the system. So I tell him. I said, I go there and tell him to get off my property. Graham shook his head again. If you tell him now. He stops. He claims ignorance. He walks away, perhaps with a slap on the wrist, and you are left with a family that hates you for stealing their inheritance because they do not know the truth about his debts. They will just see you as the one who took the $1.6 million off the table. He pointed the pen at me. We need him to commit. We need him to sign the purchase agreement. We need him to represent, in writing, under penalty of perjury, that he has the authority to sell. We need him to take money a deposit from the buyers. Why, I asked. Because then it is not a family dispute, Graham said grimly. Then it is fraud. Then it is a criminal act. If we expose him now, he is just a bad executor. If we let him sign that contract while knowing he does not hold the title, he is a felon. And more importantly, the family will see undeniable proof that he was trying to defraud them all, not just you. I stared at the lawyer. The strategy was cold. It was brutal. It required me to watch Dale destroy my grandmother's house for another few days and do nothing. I have to watch him empty the house, I asked. I have to let him throw her things away. You have to let him think he is winning. Graham said, that is the only way to ensure he loses completely. He pushed a document toward me. It was a retainer agreement. I want you to sign this. I will represent you. My job is to handle the legal filing and the developer. Your job is harder. What is my job? I asked, picking up the pen. Your job is to be the witness. Graham said, I want you to go back to that farm. I want you to attend every meeting he calls. I want you to stand there and let him insult you. I want you to let him tell you that you are getting nothing, and I want you to say nothing. He tapped the legal pad. Create a timeline, he ordered. I want every date. When she died, when he changed the locks, when he sent that email, when the loan was denied. We are going to build a chronology that shows malice aforethought. I signed the retainer. The scratch of the pen on the paper sounded loud in the quiet room. I felt a strange shift inside me. Yesterday, I was a victim. Today, I was a trap. I pulled the legal pad toward me and wrote, Timeline of events, November 12th. Dale applies for loan, denied, May 14th. Grandma Evie passes, May 15th. Dale assumes role of executor, May 20th. Locks changed, May 21st. Dumpster arrives. I looked up at Graham. There is one thing. I said, You said Grandma signed the deed here. Yes. Graham said, Who else was here? I asked. If Dale challenges the deed, if he says she was senile or coerced, I need more than just your word. He will say you are just her old lawyer friend doing a favor. Graham smiled. It was a small, dry smile. Your grandmother was smarter than that, he said. She brought her own witness, someone who is not a lawyer, someone who Dale considers invisible. Who? I asked. Graham leaned forward. Wade, he said. Wade Turner drove her here that day. He sat in this very chair. He watched her sign. He signed the witness affidavit himself. Wade, the caretaker, the man who had worked our land for 30 years, the man Dale treated like a piece of gardening equipment. He knows, I asked. He knows everything, Graham said. He has been waiting for you to ask. I stood up. My legs felt steady for the first time in days. I am going to find Wade. I said, Be careful. Ruby, Graham warned, standing up to shake my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. Dale is desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. Do not corner him until you are ready to close the trap. I am not going to corner him, I said, thinking of the dumpster and the quilt. I am going to let him walk right off the edge of the cliff. I walked out of the office into the bright sunlight. The town looked different now. It wasn't just a collection of buildings. It was a grid of laws and records. And for the first time, the machinery was working for me. I checked my phone. There were 3 missed calls from my mother and 1 text from Dale. Family meeting at the farm on Saturday. Finalizing the deal. Be there if you want to be included. I looked at the text and felt a cold surge of satisfaction. I would be there. I would be there. And I would be the quietest person in the room. I got into my car and headed toward the outskirts of town, toward the small trailer park where Wade lived. I needed to hear the story from him. I needed to know exactly what Grandma Evie had said that day 5 years ago. The road stretched out before me. The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting for a farm anymore. I was fighting for the truth of who Evelyn Maddox was and who she believed I could be. Dale thought he was racing against the clock to sell the land. He didn't realize the clock had already run out 5 years ago. The machine shed sat on the western edge of the property, a corrugated metal structure that smelled permanently of diesel fuel, cured tobacco, and grease. It was Wade Turner's cathedral. While Dale had claimed the farmhouse with his spreadsheets and his polish, Wade occupied the spaces where the actual work happened. I found him there just after leaving Graham's office, hunched over the engine block of the old John Deere tractor that was older than I was. Wade did not look up when I walked in. He was wiping his hands on a rag that was so stained with oil it looked stiff. He was a man carved out of oak and leather, his face mapped with deep lines from 60 years of Missouri sun. He wore the same charcoal work shirt he had worn every day of my childhood, or at least an identical copy of it. "Hey, Wade," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. He paused, the rag moving slowly over his knuckles. He looked at me then, his eyes pale blue and unreadable. "Miss Ruby," he said. He nodded once, a gesture that contained more respect than all of Dale's hugs combined. "Heard you had a run-in with the dumpster yesterday. News travels fast," I said, leaning against the workbench. Wade snorted softly. "Dale talks loud. Hard not to hear when he is screaming about liability and insurance." I looked at the tools hanging on the pegboard. Every wrench was outlined in black marker. A system Grandma Evie had insisted on 40 years ago so nothing would get lost. Wade had kept it up, long after she stopped coming out to the shed. "I just came from town. Wade," I said, keeping my voice low. "I went to see Graham Larkin." Wade's hands went still. He placed the rag on the bench. He turned fully toward me, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead with his forearm. He did not look surprised. He looked patient. "Is the old man still breathing?" Wade asked. "He is," I said. "He told me something." "Wade, he told me about a trip you took 5 years ago." I watched him closely. I needed to see it in his face. I needed to know that I wasn't the only one who had loved her enough to protect this place. Wade sighed, a sound like tires on gravel. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a pack of gum, offering me a stick before taking one himself. It was a stalling tactic, giving him a moment to arrange his words. "She wondered when you would ask," he said finally. "You knew I asked," the frustration bubbling up. "You knew the whole time, Wade. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me cry at the funeral, thinking Dale was going to pave over everything? Why did you let me stand in that dumpster yesterday?" Wade chewed his gum slowly, looking past me out the open bay door toward the fields. "Because she made me promise," he said. "She made you promise to hide the deed." "No," Wade said. "She made me promise to let you find it." He walked over to a metal filing cabinet in the corner, the kind that usually held warranties and parts manuals. He pulled open the top drawer. Miss Evie was a lot of things. Ruby. But she wasn't blind, he said. She knew Dale was a shark. She knew he would come for the land the second she was cold. But she also knew you. He looked at me, his gaze sharpening. "She told me once, right on that drive back from the lawyer, that if she just handed you the farm, you would treat it like a gift. You would say thank you, and you would try to keep it, but Dale would steamroll you because you have always been too polite. You have always been the peacekeeper, Ruby, just like your mother." I felt a flush of heat rise in my cheeks. It was not anger at him. It was the sting of truth. "She said you needed to get mad," Wade continued. "She said you needed to fight for it. She said, 'Wade, don't you say a word until Ruby is ready to burn the house down to save it. Until then, she isn't ready to own it.'" I stared at him. The complexity of it took my breath away. Grandma Evie hadn't just left me property. She had left me a lesson. She had hidden her legacy behind a wall of silence because she knew that the only way I could hold on to this land against a man like Dale was if I learned how to bear the weight of it myself. She loved me enough to let me suffer through the fear, so that the anger would forge me into something harder. I let out a shaky breath. "I am ready now. Wade. I am ready to burn it down." "Good," Wade said, "because they are starting the fire." He nodded toward my phone. "You might want to check that. My nephew works at the diner in town. He says your uncle has been busy on the email all morning." I pulled my phone out. I had ignored it since leaving the law office, terrified of being distracted. I opened my email app. There was a new thread. Subject, urgent. Family update. Regarding estate disposition, it was sent to everyone: my mother, my cousins in Chicago, my estranged aunt in Texas, and even some distant second cousins I hadn't seen since I was 12. I read the text, my stomach tightening. "Dear family, it breaks my heart to report that we are hitting significant roadblocks in the liquidation of Mom's estate. As you know, the market is volatile, and we have a very generous cash offer on the table that expires this weekend. Unfortunately, Ruby is having a very difficult time letting go. Her grief has manifested as obstructionism. She is refusing to cooperate with the necessary site clearing and is threatening legal action that could tie up everyone's inheritance for years. I am doing my best to manage her emotional outbursts, but please, if you can reach out to her and help her see reason, it would benefit us all. We are close to a distribution of roughly $100,000 per family unit, but only if we act as a united front. Love, Dale. He was isolating me. He was painting a target on my back and dangling $100,000 in front of relatives who I knew were struggling with mortgages and college tuitions. He was weaponizing their need against my emotional outbursts. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was Marla. I looked at Wade. He nodded. "Answer it. Put it on speaker." I tapped the green button. Ruby Marla's voice filled the small space between us. It was breathless, coated in a layer of synthetic concern. "Oh, honey, I am so glad you picked up. Dale is just beside himself." "Hello, Marla." I said, "Listen, sweetie," she said, lowering her voice as if she were conspiring with me. "I told Dale he was too harsh with the email. I know you are not trying to be difficult. I know how much you love that old quilt, but you have to understand, Dale is under so much pressure to do right by everyone." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch. "He is just worried about you." "Ruby," she continued, the mask slipping slightly, "we don't want you to embarrass yourself. The whole town is talking about you climbing in that dumpster. It is not a good look. We just want to protect your reputation. If you just sign the consent form, Dale says he can probably get you a little advance on your share. Maybe $5,000. You could take a nice trip, get some therapy." I looked at Wade. He rolled his eyes, a gesture so teenage it almost made me smile. "Marla," I said, keeping my voice flat, "I am not going on a trip, and tell Dale I read his email." "Oh, good," she said, mistaking my calmness for submission. "So we can count on you for the meeting on Saturday. No drama." "I will be there," I said. "That is wonderful," she trilled. "We are ordering catering. It will be a celebration of Evie's life." She hung up. "Celebration of life," Wade muttered. "They are celebrating the check." He turned back to the filing cabinet and dug deeper into the back, pulling out a thick, battered envelope. "You need ammunition," Wade said. "Graham has the legal papers, but you need to prove he is a liar." He handed me the envelope. I opened it. Inside were photographs, not digital prints, but actual glossy 4x6 photos that looked like they had been developed at the drugstore. I shuffled through them. They showed the south pasture. In the foreground of the first photo, standing near the creek, was a surveyor's tripod, and standing next to the surveyor, pointing at the horizon, was Dale. I turned the photo over. Wade had written the date in blue ink on the back. August 14th, 9 months ago, exactly when the blueprints were dated. "Keep going," Wade said. The next photo showed Dale shaking hands with a man in a suit standing next to a black luxury sedan parked right on the grass. I recognized the man from the Kestrel website I had looked up, but the most damning photo was the last one. It showed Dale and the developer standing on the back porch of the house, and in the window behind them, visible through the glass, was the back of Grandma Evie's head in her wheelchair. She was right there. He was selling the ground out from under her feet while she sat 10 feet away. He told her they were insurance adjusters, Wade said, his voice hard. He told her they were checking the property lines for tax purposes. I heard him lie to her face. "Ruby." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest, heavier and darker than before. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was a betrayal of dignity. "Wade," I said, "I need you to go on the record." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. "I can't ask you to testify in court if you don't want to," I said, "but I need this for the family. When the time comes, they need to hear it from you. They might think I'm crazy or greedy, but they know you. They know you never told a lie in your life." Wade wiped his hands on his pants. He looked at the phone, then at me. "Turn it on," he said. I pressed the red record button. "State your name and your relationship to Evelyn Maddox," I said, adopting the formal tone Graham had used. "Wade Turner." he said, his voice dropping into a deep, resonant register. I have been the groundskeeper at Marigold Farm for 32 years. Wade, did you ever witness Dale Maddox bring developers to the property prior to Evelyn's death? Yes, he said, 3 times, starting last August. And did you witness Evelyn Maddox sign a deed transferring the property? I did, he said. I drove her to Graham Larkin's office on October 2nd, 5 years ago. I watched her sign the papers giving the farm to Ruby Stewart. She was of sound mind. She knew exactly what she was doing. She told me she wanted to save the farm from her son. I stopped the recording. That file was now saved next to the photos of the surveyor and the text messages. Thank you. Wade, I said. He nodded and picked up his wrench again. You go on now. Miss Ruby, he said. Let them have their party on Saturday. Let them hang the balloons. I walked out of the shed into the bright sunlight. The smell of the diesel faded, replaced by the scent of fresh-cut grass and damp earth. I looked across the fields. The wind rippled through the tall fescue, creating waves that looked like a green ocean. For the last 3 days, I had felt like an intruder on my own history. I had felt small against the machinery of Dale's ambition. But as I walked back to my car, clutching the envelope of photos, I felt the ground push back against my boots. I wasn't just fighting for sentimental reasons anymore. I wasn't fighting alone. I had the law in my pocket, the truth in my hand, and the man who knew the soul of this soil standing behind me. Dale thought he was selling a piece of real estate. He didn't realize he was declaring war on the land itself, and the land had just chosen its side. The email arrived on Thursday morning with a subject line that was designed to induce panic. Mandatory Final Estate Strategy Meeting, signing. It was bold, red, and flagged as high importance. Dale had sent it to the entire extended family list, including cousins who hadn't visited Missouri in a decade. I sat in my small kitchen, the coffee growing cold in my mug, and read the body of the message. It was a masterclass in manipulation. It spoke of urgent market shifts and closing windows. It mentioned that the prospective buyers, Kestrel Land and Retail, were growing impatient with the family delays, but the line that made my blood run cold was at the bottom. Please review the attached Family Consensus Authorization Agreement. We will be executing this document on Saturday at the farm to ensure everyone receives their payout immediately. Failure to sign may result in the estate entering prolonged litigation, draining all assets to zero. He was not just inviting us to lunch, he was summoning us to a capitulation. I did not reply. I forwarded the email immediately to Graham Larkin. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in his office again. Graham had printed the attached document. He laid it flat on his desk, smoothing it out with his spotted hands. He took a red pen and circled a paragraph in the middle of the 3rd page. Here's the trap, Graham said, his voice dry as parchment. I leaned in to read the legalese. It was dense, deliberately opaque language about indemnification and waiver of claims. Translate it for me. Graham, I said. Graham tapped the paper with the pen tip. This is not a standard consent to sell, he explained. This is a retrospective waiver of fiduciary duty. If the family signs this, they are agreeing that Dale is not liable for any financial mismanagement that occurred prior to the sale. They are also granting him an irrevocable power of attorney to sign all closing documents on their behalf without further consultation. I sat back, stunned. So he wants full control. He wants immunity. Graham corrected. If he sells the farm for $1.6 million and then uses $400,000 of it to pay off his personal debts before distributing the rest. This document prevents anyone from suing him for it. He is asking the family to pre-approve his theft. He is betting on them not reading it. I said. He is betting on them being afraid. Graham said. He is threatening them with zero assets if they do not sign. He is manufacturing a crisis. To a cousin in Chicago who just wants a check for a new kitchen renovation. The threat of prolonged litigation sounds like a nightmare. They will sign anything to avoid a fight. I looked at the document. It was formatted to look official, with lines for 20 signatures. It looked like a treaty. I am not signing it. I said, we know that. Graham said. But the danger is, if everyone else signs, if he walks into a closing with 19 signatures and a narrative that you are the sole holdout, he might try to petition the court to bypass you as a hostile beneficiary. We cannot let him get that far. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it. A text from Dale. Why are you silent? I can see you read the email. I ignored it. Another buzz. Ruby, do not be selfish. You are not more important than the whole family. Do not make me play hardball. I looked at Graham. He is escalating. Let him, Graham said. Every threat is a brick in his own prison cell. Do not respond. I took a screenshot of the texts. I uploaded them to the Marigold evidence folder. My silence was driving him mad. Dale was a salesman. He needed a reaction to calibrate his pitch. By giving him nothing, I was forcing him to shadowbox with his own paranoia. Later that afternoon, the second phase of his attack arrived. My laptop pinged with a notification, a new email from Dale. This one had an attachment titled, Estate Financial Solvency Report. Confidential. I opened it. It was a spreadsheet, color-coded in angry reds and cautionary yellows. It listed the assets of the farm against the liabilities. I scanned the rows. Roof replacement required $35,000. Foundation stabilization, $40,000. Septic system overhaul, $18,000. Electrical rewiring to code, $25,000. The bottom line of the spreadsheet showed that the estate was effectively negative. It claimed that if we kept the house, the maintenance costs would bankrupt the family account within 6 months. The narrative was clear. The farm is a money pit. The farm is a corpse that is costing us money to keep on ice. We have to sell. I felt a spike of adrenaline. I knew this house. I knew its bones. I opened my own files. I went to the folder marked Maintenance that I had scanned from Grandma's records and my own bank statements. I found the invoice from Miller Son Septic Services. It was dated just 2 years ago. Total system flush and leach field repair. $2,400. Paid in full by Ruby Stewart. I pulled up the inspection report from the roof. It was 5 years old. Sure, but the inspector had estimated a 20-year lifespan on the shingles. There was no immediate replacement required. And the foundation Grandma and I had sat on the porch every evening. There were no cracks. The doors didn't stick. The house sat on Missouri limestone. It wasn't going anywhere. He was lying. He was inflating the numbers by 300% to terrify the relatives. He wanted them to look at this spreadsheet and think that Marigold Farm was a liability, not an asset. He wanted them to believe that the $1.6 million was a rescue boat coming to save them from a drowning ship. I printed the fake report. I stapled it to the real invoices I had found. I sat there, staring at the side-by-side comparison. It was so brazen. He assumed that because he was the businessman of the family, no one else would know how to read a balance sheet. He assumed that because I was just a university academic, I wouldn't know the cost of a septic tank. My phone buzzed again. It was Wade this time. No text, just an image. I opened the message. The photo was taken from inside the cab of his truck, looking out at the main entrance of the farm. 2 men were on ladders. They were using crowbars to pry the wooden archway off the stone pillars. The archway that had been burned with the words, Marigold Farm, Est, 1920. I felt a physical blow to my chest. That sign had been the first thing I saw every time I came home. It was the gateway to safety. I zoomed in on the photo. The wood was splintering as they wrenched it free. A second text from Wade popped up. He told them to take it to the dump. Said he wants a clean entrance for the open house on Saturday. He is erasing the name. Miss Ruby. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. I didn't cry. The time for crying was over. A cold, hard clarity settled over me. He was stripping the identity from the land. He was taking down the name so that when the developers arrived, they wouldn't see a home. They would just see a parcel. He was depersonalizing the murder. I picked up the phone and called Graham. Run the search, I said. Graham answered on the first ring. You mean the title search? Yes, I said. I want a full, independent title search from a company outside of the county. I want it expedited. I want the paper in my hand by Saturday morning. It will cost extra for the rush. Graham warned, I do not care. I said, I want to see it in black and white. I want to see the moment the recording office processed that deed. I will order it now. Graham said, Ruby, yes. Do not go out there, he said. I know you want to stop them from taking down the sign, but if you go out there now, you blow the surprise. Let him take the sign down. Let him think he has wiped the slate clean. It is hard. Graham, I whispered. I know, he said. But on Saturday, you are going to put that sign back up, and you are going to nail it to his forehead metaphorically. I hung up. I looked back at the spreadsheet on my screen. The red numbers seemed to bleed into the white background. Foundation $40,000. He wasn't just lying about the house. He was lying about us. He was lying about what we were. He was treating the family not as blood, but as shareholders in a failing company that he needed to liquidate. My phone chimed with another email. This one was from Marla again. It was a potluck coordination list. Hi, everyone. For the big meeting on Saturday, Dale and I will be providing the main course barbecue from City Market. Can everyone else please sign up for a side dish? Let's make this a fun farewell to the farm, a fun farewell. I scrolled down the list. Cousin Sarah was bringing potato salad. Aunt Linda was bringing coleslaw. They were all falling in line. They were bringing food to their own robbery. I typed a reply, my fingers hitting the keys with deliberate force. I will bring the dessert. It was a lie. I wasn't bringing dessert. I was bringing a briefcase full of perjury evidence, a title deed, and a recording of the caretaker. I closed the laptop. The sun was setting outside my apartment window, casting long shadows across the floor. I thought about the farm in the dark. The gate was nameless now. The locks were changed. The dumpster was full, but the land knew. The land knew who held the paper. Dale thought he was building a consensus. He thought he was herding sheep into a pen. He didn't realize that one of the sheep was a wolf in waiting. He wanted to sell our complicity. He wanted us all to sign that paper so that when the guilt hit us later, we would have no one to blame but ourselves. He wanted to spread the sin around so it wouldn't weigh so heavy on his own shoulders. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. I looked tired. My eyes were rimmed with red. But there was something else there, too. A set to my jaw that looked exactly like Grandma Evie. Dale does not look. She had said, he wasn't looking now. He was looking at his spreadsheet. He was looking at his debts. He was looking at the $1.6 million. He wasn't looking at me. And that was going to be the last mistake he ever made as the executor of the Maddox estate. Friday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. Hanging low and heavy over Grafton Ridge, the air pressure was dropping, the kind of weather that makes your joints ache and your head throb. I sat at my kitchen table, which had ceased to be a place for eating and had become a command center. My laptop was humming, running hot, surrounded by stacks of paper that documented the systematic dismantling of my family's history. I was waiting for the phone to ring. Graham Larkin had promised to call the second the expedited title search came back from the independent abstract company in Jefferson City. At 9 o'clock, the phone remained silent, but my email pinged. It was not Graham. It was a forwarded itinerary from Marla. Sent to the Family Fun group chat, she had created a chat I had remained in, but never spoken. Schedule for Saturday 11:00 a.m. Arrival and welcome drinks, 12:00 p.m. BBQ lunch, 1:00 p.m. Special guest presentation, Kestrel, Land Retail, 2:00 p.m. Family signing ceremony. My eyes locked on the 1:00 p.m. slot. Special guests. He was bringing them to the house. He was bringing the developers, the men who wanted to turn our pastures into a parking lot, to the family reunion. He wasn't just asking for a signature. He was staging a closing. He wanted the Kestrel representatives there to dazzle the cousins with suits and projections, to put a face to the $1.6 million. It was a high-pressure sales tactic. If the buyers are standing right there, holding a pen, who is going to be the rude relative who says, "Let me think about it"? I realized then that today meant today. Saturday wasn't a discussion, it was a heist. I went back to the digital pile of documents I had scraped from the study. I had been looking for big things deeds, loans, blueprints, but Graham had told me to look for the leaks. Look for where the money is bleeding. He had said, desperate men don't just borrow, they steal. I opened the folder containing the photos of the bank statements I had hurriedly snapped during my break-in. I zoomed in on the operating account for the estate, the account that was supposed to be used for funeral costs and utility bills. There was a transaction dated 3 days after Grandma died. Outgoing wire, $12,500. Recipient Apex Strategic Consulting. The name sounded generic, corporate, but it triggered a memory. Years ago, Dale had briefly tried to start a consulting firm after he got laid off from the investment bank. I couldn't remember the name, but I remembered he had registered it in Delaware to avoid taxes. I opened a new tab and searched the Missouri Secretary of State Business Registry. Nothing for Apex. I tried Delaware. There it was. Apex Strategic Consulting, LLC. I paid the $20 for the registered agent details. The PDF downloaded. I opened it. Manager Dale Maddox. Address a PEO box in St. Louis. I felt a cold shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He had wired $12,500 of Grandma's money meant for her headstone, for the taxes, for the upkeep directly into his own shell company. He had labeled it estate administration fee in the ledger, but here, in the cold, hard light of the registry, it was theft, plain and simple embezzlement. He wasn't just broke. He was a criminal, and he had done this before he even had the authority to sell the land. I added the screenshot to the Marigold evidence folder. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer audacity of it. He was stealing from his own mother's ghost. Then I found the email. It was in the sent folder of the printed chain I had photographed. I had missed it in the dark of the study, because it was at the very bottom of a long thread with the Kestrel vice president, from Dale Maddox to S. Vance. Kestrel Land Retail. Date, Tuesday. 9:15 a.m. Vance, have the check ready for Saturday. I will have the family in line. There is just one stubborn person who thinks she has a claim, but she is emotionally unstable and has no legal standing. I will handle her. Once I get the group consensus signed, you can bulldoze the barn on Monday for all I care. Just bring the deposit. I will handle her. I read the words out loud to the empty room. I will handle her. He didn't see me as a person. He didn't see me as the niece he had taught to ride a bike. He saw me as a speed bump, an unstable obstacle between him and his salvation. The phone rang. It was Graham. I picked it up instantly. Do you have it? I have the preliminary report, Graham said, his voice tight. It is exactly as we thought. The deed recording from 5 years ago is valid. It is sitting in Book 402, page 88 of the county records. You are the legal owner of Marigold Farm. Ruby, does the report show any other liens? I asked. Just the mortgage your grandmother paid off in '98. Graham said, the title is clean. It is yours. Then I can stop him. I said, feeling the urge to run to the car. I can go there right now and post the eviction notice. Ruby, listen to me, Graham snapped. The tone was sharp enough to make me sit down. If you go there now, you stop the sale. Yes, but you do not stop the war. Dale will claim the deed is a forgery. He will claim undue influence. He will say, you tricked a senile old woman. He will use that $12,000 he stole to hire a lawyer to sue you. He stole more than that. I said. I told him about the Apex Consulting wire transfer. Graham let out a low whistle. That is good, he said. That is very good. That is piercing the corporate veil. That is fiduciary fraud. But it only matters if we catch him in the act of trying to close the big deal. So what is the play? I asked. The Kestrel guys are coming at 1 o'clock tomorrow. The play is patience, Graham said. We let him dig the hole until he can't see the sky. He paused, and I could hear him shuffling papers. I want you to go to that meeting tomorrow. Ruby, I want you to look defeated. I want you to sit there while he presents his slides. I want you to let the Kestrel man put his briefcase on the table. And then, When he puts the pen in your hand, when he asks for your signature on that consent form, you ask him one question. What question you ask him? Dale, as the executor, have you performed a final title search as of this morning to guarantee the estate owns what you are selling? He will lie. I said, exactly. Graham said, he will say yes. He will say he checked everything. And because the Kestrel representative is standing right there, that lie becomes a representation of fact to a buyer. It becomes fraud inducing a contract. That is when you drop the hammer. I closed my eyes. It was a high-wire act. I had to let him get within an inch of the finish line. I will be there. I said, will you be there? I will be waiting at the end of the driveway. Graham said, I will come in when you give the signal. But you have to deliver the blow. Ruby, it has to come from the family. It has to be you standing up for Evelyn. I hung up. I spent the next 3 hours building the physical weapon I would carry into that dining room. I went to the office supply store and bought a black leather presentation binder. It had to look professional. It had to look like the work of a sane, organized, methodical woman, not the unstable girl Dale was warning everyone about. I printed everything in triplicate. Tab 1, the deed, the certified copy Graham had messaged over, showing the official county stamp from 5 years ago. Tab 2, the affidavit, Wade's sworn statement that he witnessed the signing and that Grandma was lucid. Tab 3, the competency letter, a document Graham had found in his files, a letter from Grandma's doctor dated the same week as the deed signing, stating she was fully oriented and cognitively sharp. Tab 4, the timeline, the chronology of Dale's betrayal, the dates of the blueprints versus the date of her death. Tab 5, the financials, the denied loan application with the no title stamp, the wire transfer to Apex Consulting, the inflated repair estimates next to the real receipts. I punched the holes. Click, crunch, I snapped the rings shut. Snap. It was heavy. It felt like holding a brick. I needed one more thing. I needed to know exactly what I was going to say. I couldn't rely on my temper. My temper was what Dale wanted. He wanted tears. He wanted shouting. I opened a blank document and typed, "Do not get angry. Do not cry. Do not look at Marla. Look at Dale. Speak slowly. Lower your voice so they have to lean in to hear you." I wrote out my lines. I practiced them in the mirror. Before I sign, I have a procedural question. It sounded boring. It sounded bureaucratic. It was perfect. At 5 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. I froze. Had Dale come to confront me, I looked through the peephole. It was Wade. I opened the door. He was wearing his church clothes, a clean plaid button-down and dark jeans. He held a Tupperware container in his hands. "Miss Ruby," he said, holding it out. "I made some of that cornbread your grandma liked. Thought you might need some strength for tomorrow." I took the container. The plastic was still warm. "Thank you." "Wade," I said. He looked past me at the table covered in papers. He saw the black binder. He saw the intensity in my eyes. "You got it all in there?" he asked. "Everything." I said, "Every lie he told." Wade nodded. He leaned against the doorframe, looking older than I had ever seen him. "You know," he said softly, "your grandma didn't hate Dale. She just knew he was hollow. She used to say he was like a cornstalk that grew too fast tall, but no root system. First wind that comes, he falls over. He's going to fall hard tomorrow." "Wade," I said, "you just let him talk." Wade advised, "You let him spin his web. The more he talks, the more rope he pulls out. You don't have to shout. Ruby, the land speaks through the paper. You just have to be the one to read it." "I will. I promised." He tipped his baseball cap, which he had put on over his nice hair, and walked down the hallway. I went back to the table. I ate the cornbread. It tasted like memory. It tasted like the kitchen at Marigold Farm before the silence fell. Then, at 8 o'clock, the final piece of the trap clicked into place. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat. A message from Dale. "Update. To ensure everything goes smoothly and we can distribute checks as fast as possible. I have hired a mobile notary service to attend the meeting. We will be signing the power of attorney and the consent to sell right at the dining table. Please bring your IDs. I stared at the screen. He wasn't just bringing the buyers. He was bringing the executioner. A mobile notary meant there was no cooling off period. He wanted those signatures wet and stamped before the barbecue sauce was even wiped off our fingers. He wanted it done so fast that no one had time to think, to question, or to ask why the rush was so desperate. It was reckless. It was arrogant. It was the move of a man who thought he was playing chess against a toddler. He thought he was bringing a notary to witness his victory. He didn't realize he was bringing a notary to witness his felony. I picked up the black binder. I ran my hand over the leather cover. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I thought about the drive I would make tomorrow. I thought about the dust on the road. I thought about the dumpster blocking the gate. Dale was going to walk into that room tomorrow in his best suit, shaking hands, smiling his salesman's smile, thinking he had finally scrubbed the stubborn stain of Ruby Stewart out of his life. He was bringing a pen to sign away 100 years of history. I turned off the light, leaving the room in darkness. He brought a pen. I brought the end. The gravel driveway, usually a rugged testimony to the tires of tractors and pickup trucks, had been raked smooth. It looked manicured, unnatural, like the sand in a Zen garden that no one is allowed to touch. When I pulled my car in, parking between a Lexus SUV and a rented minivan, I realized the transformation was complete. Marigold Farm was no longer a working homestead. It had been staged. It looked less like a family reunion and more like a corporate retreat held in a rustic setting to build morale before a mass layoff. White folding chairs were arranged in neat rows on the lawn. Facing the porch, round tables, rented from a party supply company in the city, were scattered under the shade of the old oak trees, draped in crisp, white linens that dazzled painfully in the midday sun. There were floral centerpieces generic, store-bought lilies that had no business sitting on land that grew wild marigolds and sunflowers. I stepped out of my car. The air smelled of expensive cologne and the smoky, sweet tang of catered barbecue. I carried nothing but my purse and the black leather presentation binder. It was heavy, weighing down my right arm, a physical anchor keeping me tethered to the reality of what was about to happen. The relatives had descended. There were nearly 30 of them. I saw Cousin Sarah from Chicago, wearing large sunglasses and holding a glass of iced tea, looking at the barn with the critical eye of someone assessing a teardown. I saw my Uncle Bob, a man who usually wore grease-stained overalls, squeezed uncomfortable into a sports coat, tugging at his collar, and moving through the crowd like a shark in a koi pond was Dale. He was wearing a charcoal suit, tailored to hide the paunch of middle age, with a pale blue tie that matched the summer sky. He didn't look like a grieving son. He looked like a senator on the campaign trail. He was shaking hands, touching elbows, laughing a beat too loud. He projected an aura of benevolent authority, the capable captain steering the ship through choppy waters. I walked toward the tables. The conversation died down as I approached, a ripple of silence spreading outward from my position. Ruby. It was Marla. She intercepted me before I could reach the drinks table. She was wearing a beige linen dress and pearls, her hair sprayed into an immobile helmet of blonde. She reached out and squeezed my arm, her fingers digging in just slightly too hard. "We were worried you wouldn't make it," she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "Dale is so stressed, honey. Please tell me you are going to be a team player today." I looked at her hand on my arm. "I am here, Marla," I said. "That is what you wanted." She smiled, a tight grimace that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned in closer, bringing with her a cloud of hairspray. "Just don't make a scene, Ruby. Everyone is having such a nice time. Look at Aunt Linda. She hasn't smiled like that since Uncle Joe died. They are excited about the possibilities. Don't take that away from them." She patted my arm and drifted away. Moving to the next cluster of relatives, I heard her murmur as she passed my mother's cousin. "She is still very emotional. We just have to be patient with her. She was so attached to the house. She can't see the logic." I found a seat at the edge of the gathering, away from the main cluster. I placed the black binder at my feet, resting against my calf. I watched them. They weren't bad people. That was the tragedy of it. They were just normal people with mortgages, car payments, and credit card debt. They were tired teachers, retired mechanics, and office managers. To them, the farm was just a symbol of the past, a place they visited once a year to eat pie and complain about the heat. They didn't hear the heartbeat of the soil. They only heard the siren song of the number Dale had whispered in their ears. 1.6 million. I heard it mentioned 3 times in 10 minutes. It is a lot of money. Cousin Sarah was saying to her husband, "We could finally fix the basement. It is a jackpot." Her husband agreed. Looking at the house, it is falling apart anyway. Better to sell it now than let it rot. They were already spending the money in their heads. Dale had done his groundwork well. He had pre-sold the dream so that the reality of the contract would feel like a formality. At 1 o'clock, the atmosphere shifted. A black sedan pulled up the driveway, crunching on the pristine gravel. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. One carried a thick leather briefcase. The other carried a portable printer and a notary seal bag. The Kestrel representatives. Dale clapped his hands. Standing on the steps of the porch, the sound was sharp, commanding attention. "All right, everyone, if we could all gather round, grab a plate, grab a seat. We have some serious business to discuss, but it is good news, very good news." The family shuffled into the folding chairs. I stayed where I was, at a table slightly to the side, but with a clear line of sight to Dale. Dale set up a portable projector screen on the porch. He connected his laptop. The image flickered to life, washing out slightly in the daylight, but readable enough. The Maddox Estate Strategic Disposition Plan. "First of all, thank you all for coming," Dale began, his voice smooth, practiced. He held a laser pointer. "We all loved Mom. We all loved Grandma Evie. This place holds a lot of memories for all of us." He paused for effect. A few aunts dabbed at their eyes. "But memories do not pay the property taxes," Dale said, his tone shifting to one of regretful pragmatism. "And unfortunately, the reality of this property is stark." He clicked the remote. The slide changed. It was the spreadsheet. The same fraudulent spreadsheet I had seen in his email, but projected 5 feet tall. The red numbers looked like arterial spray. Projected maintenance costs. Year 1, roof $35,000. Foundation stabilization, $40,000. Compliance upgrades, $25,000. "As you can see," Dale said, pointing the red laser at the inflated numbers, "the farm is hemorrhaging value. The foundation is shifting. The roof is compromised. If we hold on to this property, the estate will be bankrupt within 18 months. We will be asking you for money to keep the lights on." A murmur of alarm went through the crowd. No one wanted to pay. They wanted to be paid, but, Dale said, raising his voice to cut through the anxiety, "I have not been idle. I have been working night and day to find a solution that protects this family." He clicked again. The screen filled with the render of the Marigold Retail Plaza. The pasture where I had learned to ride horses was gone, replaced by a sleek gray parking lot filled with colorful cars. The barn was gone, replaced by a modern glass-fronted structure with a coffee shop logo and a grocery store anchor. It was hideous. It was soulless. But to the people in the folding chairs, it looked like salvation. "I have secured a buyer," Dale announced, gesturing to the man in the suit who was standing quietly by the porch railing. "Kestrel Land and Retail is the premier developer in the Midwest. They see the potential here, and because of the location, they are offering a premium." He paused, letting the silence build. $1.6 million, he said. The gasp was audible. It was a collective release of breath. I saw eyes widen. I saw mental calculators running. "However," Dale continued, his face growing serious, "there is a catch. The market is cooling. Interest rates are rising. Kestrel needs to close this deal now to lock in their financing. If we wait, if we drag this out with probate and squabbling, this offer disappears, and we are left with a rotting house and a $40,000 foundation bill." He looked around the group, making eye contact with the key influencers, the loud uncles, the gossip-prone aunts. "I am selling today," Dale declared. "The papers are ready. The buyers are here with the check." He signaled to Marla. She stepped forward, holding a clipboard. "This is the family consensus agreement," Dale said. "It gives me the authority to finalize the deal right now. This afternoon. It waives the waiting period so we can get the funds distributed to your accounts within 30 days. He looked at the notary, a small man setting up his stamp on a side table. "We have a notary on site. We are going to pass this clipboard around. Once everyone has signed, we turn this liability into a legacy." Marla handed the clipboard to Uncle Bob in the front row. He didn't even read it. He signed it with a flourish, grinning. I watched the clipboard move. It was a relay race of greed. Cousin Sarah signed. Aunt Linda signed. It moved row by row, closer to me. I sat perfectly still. My hands were in my lap. I could feel the texture of the binder's leather against my leg. Dale was watching the clipboard too. He was sweating now. I could see the sheen on his forehead. He wasn't looking at the family. He was counting the signatures. He needed unanimity. He needed to bury me under the weight of the group. The Kestrel representative, Mr. Vance, checked his watch. He looked bored. He had seen this 100 times. A desperate family, a charismatic executor, a quick sale. He didn't care about the history. He just wanted the dirt. The clipboard reached the end of the last row. My mother's cousin, a woman named Betty, who had always been kind to me, turned and walked it over to my table. "Here you go, Ruby," she said gently. "It is for the best. Honey, your grandma would want us to be taken care of." I took the clipboard. The paper was thick. It was covered in blue and black ink. A messy tapestry of consent. 20 signatures. I looked up. The chatter had stopped. Everyone was looking at me. They were waiting for the final piece of the puzzle to snap into place so they could eat their cake and celebrate their windfall. Dale was staring at me from the porch. His smile was fixed, rigid, just a formality. "Ruby," he called out, "just sign it so we can eat." Marla was standing a few feet away. Her arms crossed. Her eyes were hard. "Don't you dare!" Her look said, "Don't you dare ruin this." I picked up the pen attached to the clipboard. It was a cheap, plastic ballpoint. My hand was shaking. It wasn't a tremble of fear. It was the vibration of an engine revving before the clutch is dropped. It was the adrenaline of the hunter who has sat in the blind for 3 days and finally has the stag in the crosshairs. But to them, it looked like hesitation. It looked like the final, pathetic resistance of a girl who couldn't let go of a quilt. Dale stepped down from the porch. He walked toward me, his confidence returning as he saw my shaking hand. He thought I was breaking. He thought the pressure of the room, the eyes of the family, and the sheer weight of his authority had finally crushed me. "It is okay, Ruby," he said, his voice dripping with condescending syrup. "I know it is hard, but let me handle the burden now. Just put your name on the line." I held the pen over the paper. The tip hovered millimeters above the signature line. The silence was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. The only sound was the wind rustling the white tablecloths. A sound like ghosts whispering. I looked at the paper. The undersigned, hereby grant full authority. I looked at the render of the parking lot. I looked at Dale, who was now standing 3 feet away, his hand extended to take the clipboard the moment I finished. I gripped the pen tighter. My knuckles turned white. I didn't sign. I capped the pen with a loud, sharp click. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet clearing. I looked up at Dale. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just looked at him with the cold, flat eyes of a woman who knew exactly how much a septic tank repair cost. Dale's smile faltered. "Ruby," he asked, a note of warning creeping into his voice. I reached down and picked up the black binder. I set it on the table next to the clipboard. It made a heavy, solid thud. "I am not signing." "Dale," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried to the back row. A groan went up from the family. Marla stepped forward, her face flushing red. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" "Ruby," she hissed. "Stop being a child." Dale held up a hand to stop her. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Ruby," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl that only I could hear. If you don't sign that paper, you are getting nothing. I will drain this estate in legal fees until there is not a dime left for you. I will ruin you. I looked past him to Mr. Vance, the buyer. He was watching now. He sensed the snag. I looked back at Dale. I turned the black binder so the spine faced him. I opened the cover. You are not selling today. Dale, I said. Why, he demanded, loud enough for the room to hear. Because you are sentimental. Because you want to keep a rotting house. No. I said. I stood up. Because you don't own it. The tip of the cheap plastic ballpoint pen hovered over the signature line. It was close enough that a tiny dot of ink bled onto the paper, a microscopic black period marking the end of Marigold Farm. Around me, the tension in the air broke. I heard the collective exhale of 20 relatives. It was the sound of shoulders dropping, of clenched jaws loosening. They saw the pen touching the paper and they saw their money. They saw the roof repairs on their own houses, the college tuition payments, the paid-off credit cards. They saw the $1.6 million turning from a fantasy into a deposit. Marla, standing just behind my left shoulder, let out a breathy, triumphant laugh. She reached out and squeezed my shoulder again, her fingers digging into my trapezius muscle. It was a touch that mimicked affection, but felt entirely like ownership. "Good girl," she whispered, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I knew you would do the right thing. Ruby, we are all so proud of you." She was already celebrating. She was already mentally redecorating her kitchen. I looked at the signature line. Ruby Stewart. That was all they needed. 2 words to erase a century of history. I felt the heat of the sun on the back of my neck. I felt the weight of the black binder resting against my leg under the table. I felt the gaze of Mr. Vance, the Kestrel representative, who was checking his watch again, bored by the family theater. I lifted the pen, but I did not write, with a movement that was deliberate and slow. I took the cap of the pen, which I was holding in my left hand, and slid it back onto the barrel. Click. The sound was small. It was a tiny snap of plastic, but in the silence of the garden, it sounded like a bolt sliding home in a rifle. I set the pen down on the tablecloth. I pushed the clipboard 2 inches away from me. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of confusion. Marla's hand froze on my shoulder. "Ruby," she asked, her voice tight. "The ink is drying. Honey, what are you doing?" I ignored her. I turned my chair slightly so I was facing the porch directly. I looked past the centerpiece of wilting lilies. I locked eyes with Dale. He was smiling, but the smile was beginning to twitch at the corners. He looked like a newscaster whose teleprompter had just gone blank. "Is there a problem with the pen?" Dale called out, forcing a chuckle. "We have plenty of pens." "Ruby, the pen is fine." "Dale," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I used when advising a student that they had failed a midterm. It was devoid of emotion. It was clinical. "Then sign the paper," he said, his tone sharpening. "The notary is waiting. Mr. Vance is waiting. Before I sign," I said, raising my voice just enough to carry to the back row without shouting, "I have a procedural question." Dale rolled his eyes. He threw his hands up in a gesture of exaggerated exasperation, inviting the family to share in his annoyance. "Procedural," he scoffed. "This isn't a faculty meeting. Ruby, this is a family barbecue. We don't need Robert's Rules of Order. We need a signature. It is a simple question." I said. I did not blink. I did not look away. Mr. Vance, standing by the porch railing, looked up from his phone. He was listening now. Procedural questions in real estate deals were never good. Dale sighed, crossing his arms over his chest. "Fine. Ask your question. Let's get this over with so we can eat." I took a breath. I let the air fill my lungs, grounding me. "Dale," I said, "as the executor of the estate, did you personally go to the county recorder's office this morning to pull the most current copy of the property deed?" The question hung in the humid air. Dale stared at me. He looked confused. He had expected me to ask about the furniture. He had expected me to ask about the quilt. He had expected an emotional plea about Grandma's spirit. He was armed to fight sentimentality. He was not armed to fight bureaucracy. "Why would I do that?" he asked, his voice dripping with dismissal. "So you haven't checked the title since Grandma passed?" I pressed. "I don't need to check the title." "Ruby," he snapped. He stepped off the porch, walking onto the grass, closing the distance between us. He wanted to use his physical presence to intimidate me. "I am the executor. I have the will. I have the power of appointment. The title is in the estate. It has been in the estate since Dad died in '98. So you are representing to Kestrel Land and Retail, right now, that the estate holds clear and marketable title to this land?" I asked. I gestured slightly toward Mr. Vance. The developer straightened up. He was watching Dale closely. "Of course I am," Dale shouted. He was red in the face now. He was sweating. "This is ridiculous. You are trying to stall. You are trying to embarrass me in front of our partners. I am not trying to embarrass you. Dale," I said, "I am trying to keep you from committing a felony." A gasp went through the crowd. My mother put her hand over her mouth. Cousin Sarah lowered her sunglasses. Dale stopped walking. He stood 10 feet away from me. His fists were clenched at his sides. "You are out of line," he hissed. "You are unstable. I told everyone you would do this. You are so obsessed with your little memories that you are willing to sabotage the future of this entire family." He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms. "Look at her," he shouted, pointing a finger at me. "She doesn't care about your debts. She doesn't care about your kids' college funds. She wants to keep this rotting pile of wood just so she can come sit on the porch once a year." "She is selfish," Marla chimed in, her voice shrill. "Shame on you, Ruby. Shame on you for ruining this." I did not react to their anger. Their anger was noise. I was interested in the signal. I reached down and picked up the black binder. I placed it on the table. It made a heavy, authoritative sound against the wood. Thud. I unzipped the binder. The zipper sound was loud, tearing through the murmur of the relatives. "I am not doing this for memories." "Dale," I said. I flipped the cover open. The plastic sheet protectors glinted in the sunlight. "I am doing this because you are selling something you do not have." Dale laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "I don't have it. I have the keys." "Ruby, I have the maintenance bills. I have the burden." I turned to the first tab. I pulled out the document. It was a certified copy of the deed, stamped with the official seal of the County Recorder of Deeds. The seal was embossed, raising the paper in a circle that looked like a shield. I stood up. I walked around the table. Marla tried to block me, but I stepped around her as if she were a ghost. I walked straight up to Dale. He held his ground, his chin jutting out aggressively. "What is that?" he sneered. "A letter from your therapist." I did not answer. I held the paper up so Mr. Vance could see the header. Then I slapped it onto the clipboard that Dale was holding, right on top of the consent form with all the family signatures. "Read the date." "Dale," I said. He looked down. He didn't want to. He wanted to tear it up. But the eyes of the developer were on him. The eyes of the notary were on him. He looked at the paper. I saw his eyes scan the header. Quitclaim deed. Inter vivos transfer. I saw his eyes drop to the date. October 2nd. 5 years ago. I saw his eyes move to the grantee section. Ruby Stewart. And then I saw the realization hit him. It started in his hands. The knuckles gripping the clipboard turned yellow-white. Then it moved to his throat, which bobbed as he tried to swallow. And finally, it reached his face. The politician's smile didn't just fade. It disintegrated. The arrogance evaporated, leaving behind something naked and terrified. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had stepped off a curb and found himself falling into a canyon. He looked up at me. His eyes were wide, panicked, searching my face for a sign that this was a joke. But I wasn't joking. "You didn't check the records." "Dale," I said softly. "Because you didn't want to know." I turned to Mr. Vance. "The deal is off," I said. "The estate doesn't own Marigold Farm." I pointed to the paper in Dale's trembling hands. "I do." "This is a forgery." Dale's voice cracked, a high-pitched sound that betrayed the panic clawing at his throat. He threw the certified deed onto the table. the paper sliding across the white linen until it hit the pitcher of iced tea. "It is a forgery," he screamed again, looking wildly at the family. "She printed this off the internet. You can fake anything these days. Grandma never signed this. She would never cut this family out. Ruby is lying to you." I did not raise my voice. I reached back into the black binder. "Tab 2, I said calmly. I pulled out a photocopy of a page from a notary logbook. It was dense with handwritten entries. I placed it next to the deed. "This is the official log from the notary public," I said, pointing to the entry. "October 2nd, Evelyn Maddox. Identification used Missouri driver's license. Signature of notary, Graham Larkin. Signature of witness Wade Turner." I looked at Dale. "The stamp matches." "Dale, the index number matches. You can call the state board if you want to verify the commission number." Dale snatched the paper up, his eyes darting back and forth. He was looking for a flaw, a smudge, anything to cling to. "She was senile," he shouted, pivoting instantly to a new defense. He turned to the aunts and cousins, his arms wide. "You all remember how she was? She was confused. She forgot names. Ruby dragged a confused old woman to a lawyer and tricked her into signing away the farm. That is elder abuse that voids the deed." I saw heads nodding in the crowd. Cousin Sarah looked at me with suspicion. This was the narrative they could believe. It was easier to believe I was a villain than to believe their windfall was a lie. "Tab 3, I said. I slid the next document across the table. It was on thick, medical letterhead. "This is a letter of competency from Dr. Batra Evans, Grandma's primary care physician for 20 years. I said, "It is dated October 2nd, the same day as the signing. Graham Larkin required it before he would let her sign the papers." I read the text aloud, my voice cutting through the murmuring of the crowd. "Patient Evelyn Maddox is fully oriented to time, place, and person. She demonstrates clear understanding of her assets and her intentions regarding estate planning. There is no evidence of cognitive decline that would impede legal decision-making." I looked at Marla. Her face had gone the color of ash. She knew Dr. Evans. Everyone knew Dr. Evans. He was the most respected doctor in the county. You couldn't fake his signature. And you certainly couldn't bribe him. Dale was breathing hard now. Short, ragged gasps. He was losing the room. I could feel the shift in gravity. The cousins weren't looking at the papers anymore. They were looking at him. But why? Dale stammered, his hands shaking so hard the papers rattled. "Why would she do this? Why would she hide it?" "Because she knew you." "Dale," I said. I unzipped the second pocket of the binder. "She knew you were planning to sell the farm before she was even in the ground." I pulled out the large, folded architectural rendering of the Marigold Retail Plaza. I snapped it open. It covered the entire table, burying the deed and the medical letter under a vision of asphalt and concrete. I pointed to the date stamp in the corner. "September 12th. I said, "Grandma died in May. You commissioned these drawings 9 months before she passed." A gasp went through the crowd, louder this time. Aunt Linda stood up, her hand over her mouth. "You were planning this last year?" she asked, her voice trembling. "While we were having Thanksgiving dinner, you were measuring the dining room for a parking lot." Dale tried to cover the date with his hand. "These were just exploratory. I was doing due diligence. I wanted to be prepared for what I asked. To cash out, I pulled out the final document, the loan application, the one stamped denied in red ink. I held it up for everyone to see. You didn't want to sell the farm to help the family. Dale, you wanted to sell it because you owe $400,000 in personal debt and the bank cut you off." I threw the paper down. It landed face up. The no title stamp seemed to pulse in the sunlight. "You are not the executor of a windfall." I said, "You are a man looking for a getaway car, and you were going to use our inheritance to pay for the gas." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bubble bursting. The dream of the new kitchens and the paid tuitions vanished, replaced by the ugly, sharp reality of betrayal. Mr. Vance, the Kestrel representative, stepped forward. He walked to the table. He didn't look at me. He looked at Dale. "Is this true?" Vance asked. His voice was low, dangerous. Do you hold the title or not? Dale looked at Vance. He looked at the family. He looked at the paperwork spread out like an autopsy of his integrity. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. There was no spin left. There was no sales pitch that could fix this. Vance nodded once, a sharp, curt motion. He picked up his briefcase. The deal is off, Vance said. He turned to his assistant. Pack up the printer. We are leaving. Wait, Dale screamed, lunging after him. Vance, listen, we can fix this. She is just one person. We can sue her. We can challenge the deed. Vance stopped. He looked at Dale with pure disgust. You represented that you had clear title. Vance said, you brought me here to sign a contract you knew was fraudulent. You are lucky I don't call the district attorney on my way out of the driveway. Do not contact my firm again. He walked down the porch steps, his shoes crunching on the gravel. The sound of his car door slamming was the final period on Dale's sentence. Dale stood alone in the grass. He looked small. The suit that had looked so powerful an hour ago now looked like a costume. He turned back to me. His face was twisted with hate. You ruined it. He spat. You happy now? You get to keep your rotting house. And the family gets nothing. You stole from them. He pointed at the cousins. She took your money, he shouted at them. She took your $100,000. But no one moved. No one yelled at me. Instead, Uncle Bob stood up. He walked over to the table and picked up the spreadsheet, the one with the inflated repair costs. You said the foundation cost $40,000 to fix, Bob said, his voice heavy. It does, Dale lied. I have the receipts. Bob, I said quietly, I paid for the inspection myself. The foundation is fine. The roof is fine. Bob looked at Dale. Then where did the $12,000 go, he asked. The money you wired from Mom's account last week? Dale froze. Marla stepped back, distancing herself from her husband. You stole from Mom? Aunt Linda asked. Her voice wasn't sad anymore. It was furious. That was the funeral money. Dale, I didn't steal it. I was managing expenses. A car door slammed at the end of the driveway. We all turned. Graham Larkin was walking up the drive. He moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but he looked like a judge approaching the bench. He was wearing his three-piece suit despite the heat. He walked straight to the table. He looked at the papers. He looked at Dale. Mr. Maddox, Graham said. His voice was gravel and authority. Who are you? Dale snapped, though he looked terrified. I am the attorney of record for the owner of this property, Graham said, and I am here to inform you that you are currently trespassing. He turned to the notary, who was frantically packing his bag. I suggest you leave. Son, Graham said. Unless you want to be deposed as an accessory to attempted fraud. The notary literally ran to his car. Graham turned back to the family. The deed is valid, he announced. Ruby Stewart is the sole owner of Marigold Farm. There is no sale. There is no $1.6 million. There is only the truth, which is that Evelyn Maddox wanted this land protected from the very man standing before you. He looked at Dale. If you continue to harass my client, or if you attempt to enter this property again without invitation, we will file immediate criminal charges regarding the misappropriation of estate funds. Do I make myself clear? Dale looked at Graham. He looked at the family, who were now staring at him with a mixture of pity and revulsion. He looked at Marla, who was busy typing on her phone, likely calling a divorce lawyer or an Uber. He didn't say a word. He turned and walked to his SUV. He didn't run. He slunk. He got in, started the engine, and drove away. He didn't even wait for his wife. The dust from his tires settled over the white tablecloths. The silence returned to the farm. But it wasn't the heavy silence of before. It was the quiet of a storm that had passed. I looked at the family. They looked lost. They were angry. Yes, but mostly they looked embarrassed. They had been ready to sell their history for a check, and now they had to sit in the shade of the trees they had almost cut down. I didn't gloat. I didn't lecture. I closed the black binder. Snap. I picked it up. You are welcome to finish the barbecue. I said to them, the food is paid for. I looked at the house. my house. The sign was gone from the gate, but I knew where it was. I would put it back up tomorrow, but after you eat, I said, my voice firm. I'm going to have to ask you to clear the property. I have a lot of work to do, and I need to change the locks. I turned and walked up the porch steps. I didn't look back. I heard the murmur of their voices start up again, low and apologetic, but I didn't stop. I opened the front door. The house smelled of stale air and old dust, but underneath that, I could smell it, the faint, sweet scent of dried lavender and old paper. I walked into the kitchen. I went to the window and looked out at the marigolds blooming in the garden box. They were bright orange, defiant against the weeds. I touched the glass. I am here. Grandma, I whispered, and for the first time in 6 days, the house didn't feel empty. It felt full. The today that Dale had threatened us with was over. Tomorrow was mine. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and reclamation. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Ruby's victory. If you enjoyed seeing the underdog win, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need a reminder that the truth always wins.